Welcome to the Intro to ICD-10 course. We're going to talk about the basics of ICD-10 and how you can utilize these codes. First, let's talk about the code itself. An ICD-10 code is 3 to 7 digits. The first letter indicates the chapter that the code is from. It's time to flip through your book, so get it out. It's important to know the layout of the ICD-10 book. It's a big book, so finding what you need quickly will be key. The introduction of the book gives you information on the organization of the book. This will be a good study tool for this chapter. The conventions section are guidelines on how codes are selected. This will be another good tool to study for this section. Guidelines section are instructions on how to assign codes for certain situations. We will go in more depth in the next chapter on guidelines. Your alphabetic index is the index that looks like a dictionary almost. We'll go into that more in detail here in a minute. Your table of drugs and chemicals, the Neoplasm table, external cause and injury index, and your tabular list. The sections, the colored sections. We'll go into detail on all of these areas. First, though, you need to tab your book. It's important to tab your book. This is a very big book, and you need to be able to get to your conventions, your chapters very quickly. And let's get started. Turn to the alphabetic index. It is called the list of diseases and injuries. You'll see that at the top of the page. This is how the alphabetic index is laid out. The main term is in bold. The subterm is indented, and the additional terms are indented under the subterm. Here's an example. As you can see, history on this slide is the main term. The subterm is family, and the additional terms are indented underneath that. So if I was looking for family history of alcohol abuse, I would go to history, family, alcohol abuse, and as you can see, it would point you to Z81.1. Now it's your turn to try. Locate the code in the alphabetic index for personal history of childhood abuse. Pause this video and get your code. You should have got Z62.819. You should have went to the main term history in bold, the subterm personal, and the additional term childhood, and the additional term abuse. Now that you've learned about the table of diseases, I want you to learn about the Neoplasm table. It is immediately after the alphabetic index. As you can see, it looks like a table that is broken down by malignant neoplasms, benign neoplasm, uncertain neoplasm, and unspecified. The terms look just like the terms in the alphabetic index. The main term will be in bold, the subterm indented, and the additional terms indented under the subterm. We're going to talk about how you know the difference in malignant, benign, uncertain, and unspecified on the next slide. A malignant primary is the primary site where the cancer originated. Malignant secondary is the site where the cancer metastasized to, where it spread to. Caught in situ refers to cancer that is confined to the original site and is encapsulated. It will not metastasize or spread. Benign means not cancerous. Uncertain, the behavior of the neoplasm is specified as uncertain. Unspecified, the note does not specify if the neoplasm is benign or malignant. Helpful hint. Remember that usually a code that starts with C is a malignant neoplasm. Memorize C for cancer. This will help you and will be a shortcut in the future. Now I want you to try. What is the code in the index for primary malignancy of the abdominal wall? Pause this recording and get your code. You should have got C44.509. You would have went to neoplasm as your main term, then abdomen, abdominal as your subterm, and then wall, and then under the column malignant primary, C44.509. After your table of neoplasms, you have your table of drugs and chemicals. Just like the table of neoplasms, it has columns for poisoning, accidental, unintentional, poisoning, intentional, self-harm, poisoning, assault, poisoning, undermined, adverse effect, and underdosing. The first four columns are for poisoning. A poisoning occurs when a drug is taken in the wrong dosage or is taken in error. It is also used for intoxication or poisoning by a drug or other chemical substance. These columns are discussed further in later chapters. An adverse effect is when a drug has been correctly prescribed and properly administered, but the patient had an adverse effect to the drug. The underdosing column is used to report when the patient takes less of a medication than is prescribed by a provider or manufacturer's instruction. Codes for this column are never assigned as a principal or first listed code. Make a note of that. Now turn to the External Cause of Injury Index. Pause this video while you find it. The External Cause of Injury Index describes how an injury occurred. These codes are for research, and they aren't required or mandatory at this time to report. These codes are never coded as the primary first diagnosis. That's important to remember. If you see one of these as the first diagnosis, you can automatically count out that answer choice. Now it's your turn to try. What is the code in the index for fall down a ladder? Pause this recording and get your answer. You should have gotten W11. Now that you've learned about all the indexes, the last step to getting your ICD-10 code is to confirm the code in the tabular list. These are the colored chapters. Look through those now. You must always confirm the diagnosis code in this tabular list. Never code straight from the alphabetic index. There are 21 chapters, and I'd like for you to go through them now. Some chapters to memorize that will help you in the future and especially on your test are S codes equal injury codes, R codes equal signs and symptoms, and C codes equal malignant cancer codes. Write those down in your book. Now that you've learned all the basic steps to find a code, we're going to go through it again to recap together. What is the ICD-10 code for low back pain? The first thing we got to do is figure out what the main term is. A little tip I have is if you can't figure out what to look up first, go with the last word. It's usually the word you need to look up for the main term. So in this case, we're going to look up pain. Step 2, look up the main term in the alphabetic index. We'll go to the bold term pain, as you can see in this picture. Step 3, what is the subterm? And the subterm in this case is low back. It is pointing us to M54.5. We must go to the tabular list to confirm. Make sure the diagnosis matches the scenario and look at all excludes 1 and excludes 2 notes, which we will go over in more detail later. Now let's talk about the code structure in more detail. Every chapter is based on a body system or condition. For example, Chapter 4, Endocrine, Nutritional, and Metabolic Diseases, in parentheses, E00 to E89. After the chapter, you have sections. The section is a group of 3 character categories. For example, diabetes mellitus, E08 to E13. After your section, you have categories. 3 character code numbers are what indicate a category. For example, E11, type 2 diabetes mellitus. Now let's look at it in the book. If you turn to E08 in your tabular list, you will see the section, and it's in bold, with the ICD-10 categories in parentheses. The category is E08, diabetes mellitus. The codes underneath it are indented. That's another good indicator. Now that we've talked about the tabular list, let's go deeper into the symbols and colors in the tabular list that are going to help you. If you've noticed, there's a red fifth symbol next to some codes. The fifth character required icon means this is not a complete code, and you must choose from one of the codes indented with 5 characters. See this example. M71.2 has the 5th character symbol next to it. It cannot be coded alone without a 5th character. Indented underneath it is the same code, M71.2, with an additional digit. Now it's time to talk about coding conventions. These are symbols that will help you when coding. Default code. A code listed next to a bold main term is called the default code. It represents the condition that is most commonly associated with the main term, or is unspecified code for the condition. For example, anxiety. The code next to it is F41.9. If you look at that in your tabular list, that is anxiety unspecified. To further specify, you must put the type of anxiety. Was it depression, episodic, generalized? The 7th character symbol next to a code means that you must go to the beginning of the section and add one of the characters highlighted. A is for initial encounter for a closed fracture. B is for an initial encounter for open fracture. D is subsequent encounter for fracture with routine healing. G is subsequent encounter for fracture with delayed healing. K is subsequent encounter for fracture with non-union. And S is sequela. The main thing to remember here is that the 7th character will not be indented underneath the code. You have to go back up to the beginning of the section. Now let's talk about a placeholder. People get confused here, but I think you can get it. The letter X is used as a placeholder in ICD-10 coding. The X is inserted into the 5th or 6th digit of a code with 6 or 7 characters. If there is not a 5th or 6th character, an X is needed. They were created by ICD-10 to allow for future code expansion. You will see a 7th placeholder alert symbol in blue next to the code. Remember that. Now let's look at one together. Look at this code S00.9, superficial injury of unspecified part of the head. It says a 5th digit is required. You go to the indented codes below and pick which one goes with your scenario. So let's just say it's unspecified, S00.90. Well, now this code is saying we need the 7th character. If we go back up to our beginning of our section and add an A for initial encounter, that's still not 7 characters. So we have to add an X in the 6th slot and then the A at the end for initial encounter. So our code would be S00.90XA. Now turn to the convention section in your ICD-10 book and you can follow along. We're going to talk about NEC, NOS, and the word AND. Use of the word AND in a narrative statement or code title may be interpreted as and or. NEC stands for Not Elsewhere Classifiable. This abbreviation in the Alphabetic Index represents Other Specified. When a specific code is not available for a condition, the Alphabetic Index directs the coder to use Other Specified code in the tabular list. NOS stands for Not Otherwise Specified. The abbreviation is equivalent of unspecified. The difference in unspecified and other specified is, with unspecified, the note just did not specify the type of disease. Other specified means that the note did describe the disease, and specified what type it was, but there is no code to represent it. Now let's talk about punctuation. First, let's talk about the brackets. These are used in the tabular list to enclose synonyms, which are alternative words or explanatory phrases. Brackets used in the alphabetic index are used to identify manifestation codes. So they're used for different cases in the tabular list and the alphabetic index. The parentheses are used in both the alphabetic index and tabular list to enclose supplementary words that may be present or absent in the statement of a disease or procedure without affecting the code number to which it is assigned. The terms within the parentheses are referred to as non-essential modifiers. Let's look at an example by looking up enteritis in the index. Acute is a non-essential modifier and it is enclosed in parentheses. In this case, the non-essential modifier acute does not apply to the sub-entry chronic. Now let's look at the includes note. You can see an example in this picture. Under iron deficiency anemia, includes note is highlighted below it. This note appears immediately after a 3-character code title to further define or give examples of the content of the category. Example, M80. See that and look at the includes notes. This will help you know that you don't have to find another ICD-10 code for that disease because it is included in the one that you are at. Now let's talk about the excludes notes. There is an excludes 1 and an excludes 2, and you don't want to get them confused. Excludes 1 means do not code together. Excludes 1 indicates codes excluded should never be used at the same time as the code above the excludes 1 note. Excludes 2 means can be coded together. Excludes 2 indicates the condition excluded is not part of the condition represented by the code, but a patient may have both conditions at the same time. Let's look at an example. Under G44 Other Headache Syndromes, excludes 1 can't be coded together is headache not otherwise specified. R51. Excludes 2, which means can be coded together if both conditions are present, is atypical facial pain, headache due to lumbar puncture, migraines, and trigeminal neuralgia. Let's go over some general coding guidelines that you need to remember. Acute and chronic conditions. If a condition is described as acute and chronic and 2 different codes exist instead of a combination code, code both and sequence the acute code first. Make a note of that. Secondly, code first and use additional code. These tell you how to sequence a code. For some conditions, ICD-10 has a coding convention that requires the underlying condition to be coded first, followed by the manifestation. There will be a code first on the manifestation code and a use additional code on the etiology code. See examples on M80 and M89.7. Here's an example. Look at code G72.0, drug-induced myopathy. Underneath it, it says use additional code for adverse effect, if applicable, to identify drug, and it gives you the code range to go to. That way you don't have to look up in your alphabetic index and start all the way over. When the use additional and code first codes are underneath indented codes, you just use it with those codes. Notice G72.3 does not have a red indicator underneath it. That's because you would not need to do that with that code. If the use additional code and code first was underneath the section header G72, then it would apply to all of the sub-indented codes. Here's an example of that. Look at M70. Underneath that category, it says use additional external cause code. Because it's underneath the category header code, it applies to all codes indented underneath M70. Look in your book because every book is different. but it should have a guide as to what the different colors in the book mean. For example, in the book that I have, unspecified codes are highlighted yellow, key terms are green, manifestation codes are highlighted with a light blue, and other specified codes are highlighted gray. Look in your book for these. Signs and symptoms. This is very important to remember. When a patient comes in with a sign or a symptom, such as abdominal pain, the doctor does his evaluation and diagnoses the patient with appendicitis. You will not code the abdominal pain because it did result in a final diagnosis. The appendicitis was causing the abdominal pain. If the symptoms are not related to the condition being coded, you can code the symptoms, but symptom codes, which start with R, are never coded as the first diagnosis code. Lastly, some other rules. On an operative report, there is a preoperative diagnosis and a postoperative diagnosis. Always code from the postoperative diagnosis when available. Only code definitive diagnoses. If you have a diagnosis that states probable, possible, suspects, or rule out, do not code. Instead, code the signs and symptoms. We must never code anything that is not definitive. That's all for the Intro to ICD-10 lecture. Make sure to go do your assignments now.